You might need MIDI if you ever hairsprayed your bangs into a waterfall, layered slouch socks, tied a scrunchie to the bottom corner of your t-shirt, or tried to go for a run with a CD player. If this took you down memory lane, you might need MIDI. Perimenopause can start 10 years before you actually go through menopause. So for some women, that can be as early as 35. Nobody ever told you that? Well, nobody told us either. That's why we built MIDI. If you're experiencing symptoms like night sweats, weight gain, or just generally don't feel like yourself anymore, you may be in perimenopause. But here's some good news. With the right care, these symptoms are treatable. Book a virtual visit with a menopause specialist at MIDI. Visit joinmidi.com to schedule with an expert who gets it. Specialist-led care, virtual visits, insurance eligible. Midlife needs MIDI. Results may vary. Medications prescribed only if clinically appropriate based on a consultation with a clinician. Insurance coverage varies. Check with your plan for coverage.
You know that thing where you get an amazing pair of shoes at a really great price and want to tell everyone about it? Yeah, so do we. Here at Designer Shoe Warehouse, we'll give you something to brag about. Like the latest styles from brands you love, or the trends everyone's obsessing over, or shoes that make you feel like, well, you. So go ahead, show off a little. Find shoes that get you at prices that get your budget. Head to your DSW store or DSW.com today. DSW, let us surprise you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. You are not going to want to miss this episode on the Black Dahlia with the filmmakers of a new series that is going to blow your mind. But before we dive into that episode, we just wanted to announce that we're releasing a really special project that Rob and I produced and directed called Making an Exoneree.
Do you think it's possible that you could be convicted of a murder that you didn't commit? Well, it happens every day in this country.
We were invited to Georgetown universities to investigate 5 wrongful conviction cases, and what we found was shocking.
How could the justice system fail so many people?
Watch our award-winning film on the Partners in True Crime YouTube channel.
Part 1 drops Thursday, July 16th, Part 2, July 23rd, and Part 3 on July 30th. Subscribe and follow the investigation, and we want to hear what you think.
We would love it if you could show your support so we can continue to make these cutting-edge documentaries by going to our YouTube page and hit the thanks button and submit your donation.
Watch the trailer now and then stay tuned for the breaking developments in the Black Dahlia case.
I'll just sit in jail and fight it forever. They know what they did is wrong. They ignored 7 witnesses in the confession. The case is full of corruption. So I'm just going to keep fighting.
We have so many wrongful convictions because there's a rush to closure above the truth.
Innocent until proven guilty should be upheld, but it's not often.
The criminal justice system doesn't work like it does on Law and Order.
So many people believe you must be guilty of something. You wouldn't be sitting at a defense table at a trial.
Marty himself was wrongfully convicted when we were seniors in high school. His parents were murdered. He was convicted of murdering his parents.
Guilty.
And I would tell people, I have a friend who's in prison who's innocent.
6,338 days I was in prison before I was finally released. So when Mark asked me to teach a class at Georgetown to save someone else's life, how could I say no?
Our goal for this course is for this to be life-changing.
Each team of 3 or 4 kids is taking on a case of wrongful conviction.
So the shooter shoots once in the air and then 3 times at you.
Justin Baumgartner's body was recovered
right here.
I want to know what the hell went down the night of May 3rd, 2008.
The Holy Grail for us would obviously be one of our 5 getting out.
Don't just walk out with blood all over you after murdering 3 people. Just go over to your neighbor and be like, hey, what's up? Nonsense.
We know it's an uphill battle. We know it's really hard to get somebody out.
Do you not agree that there are wrongful convictions?
Oh, there absolutely are wrongful convictions. This isn't one.
But we're going to try to show there's a major injustice that took place here.
The tape was stopped at least 4 times. This is evidence contamination.
Where's your sketch? Where's your micrograph images? Show me some proof that those marks match.
These are lawyers who take oaths to their profession, and they cheat, steal, hide evidence.
3 people said Valentino Dixon was the shooter, but there's 10 other people who said it was a different person.
Even if I was to get my freedom tomorrow, I'm labeled a murderer.
You literally feel like you have someone's life in your hands, and at the end of this course, I want to be able to give these people hope.
These kids are smart, they're passionate, they have an interest.
Good catch with What have you found? Wow!
But this isn't just a class. This isn't just about wrongful convictions. This is about people's lives.
So many lawyers have been trying to get people out for years. What are we going to do? We're college kids.
You are eligible for release today.
Okay. All right, so we're back with Partners in True Crime, and we have a special episode here. We met these two individuals through our good friend Lenny DePaul, who has been helping us with the Alcatraz case and also the documentary that we're doing for Discovery HBO Max. And he said, you got to meet these people. They've been dealing with this. I've been working with them on this case for a while now, and it's a crazy case. And he goes, he was pretty sure that you guys have come to a conclusion on this case. It was very exciting because we rarely meet people like ourselves who dive deep into cases as much as we do, and you guys have dove really deep into this case. And the case we're talking about is the Black Dahlia case. And for anybody who's not familiar with that case, it happened a long time ago in 1947. It was the murder of a 22-year-old Hollywood hopeful in Los Angeles. And according to the FBI website, they're saying this has never been solved. So what I thought was interesting. And but it was really creepy because this one morning on January 15th in 1947, this mother was with her baby in a stroller going down the sidewalk and stumbled upon probably one of the most gruesome sights that she's ever seen. She saw the half torso of a woman, a 22-year-old woman, just kind of propped up there. And then, they were able to identify her later on through her fingerprints, but they really couldn't solve this case for many, many years. They didn't know what was going on. So I just want to introduce you to two people that are in front of us here that have been diving into this case, Kimberly Lupini and Jeff Thomas. They've been working on this documentary with Lenny DePaul for a while now, and they have tons of footage, and they're putting together, and we saw the trailer. We're very excited about this case. So guys, welcome to Partners in True Crime. Thank you for coming on.
Rob and Cindy, thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you for having us.
We just want to say thank you. We're tremendous fans, love everything you're doing, especially everything that you're doing with drawing attention to cold cases. It's something we cannot get out there and broadcast loud enough. So thank you for everything that the two of you are doing.
Oh, that's very nice.
That's great.
But I think it's really interesting because Black Dahlia, it's an iconic case. It's like Alcatraz. It's very similar, like when we started diving into what you guys were doing to what we've been doing. We work on a lot of cold cases, but we're also working on Alcatraz, which is the biggest true crime mystery of all time, besides the Black Dahlia, which I think is like number 2 after Alcatraz. I mean, people are fascinated with this case and really want to know what happened. And it's shocking to everyone that after all these years, there's really hasn't been any answers until now. But you guys have come up with some revelations that are pretty shocking. So I guess we'll just have you guys.
Well, first off, before we dive into the case, what prompted you to kind of look into this case? I mean, and tell us a little bit about yourselves and your background and how you guys got together, and then why the Black Dahlia case.
Absolutely. And it's a fascinating story how it all begins and how we literally were pulled into it. Never once did Kim and I say, hey, let's do something on the Black Dahlia. Never once did we say, let's do anything true crime. And just in all honesty, love and appreciate you guys. But my entire life, I've never really been a fan of true crime. I've never been attracted to the genre, never interested in it. I come from a filmmaking background to where everything I've ever produced or directed or written always has a script. So the whole documentary thing was completely foreign to me. But it was when I directed a film a number of years ago that I became friends with an actor on the production. And even after we wrapped, we maintained a friendship and we're in contact with one another. And just out of the blue, he gives me a call one day saying, hey, I'm going to be doing an appearance in this town. Is it anywhere close to your town? And I was like, yeah, you're like 15 minutes away. Let's get together for lunch. So we did the customary lunch and we're asking each other, well, hey, what projects are you working on now? Well, what films are you doing and whatnot? And when it became my turn, I had shared with them how I was actually taking one of my scripts and turning it into a book, because the producer at the time thought he'd like to sell it as a book and a script, the script being based upon the book and everything. So I was trying to figure out how I got this 120-page script, which was really quite long as a script. How do I get that to novel length form? And I remember reading in a magazine back when I was like 11, 12, 13, I was very young, about this Black Dahlia case. And the big thing that stuck out with me, which you just said, it's so gruesome, but also at the same time, it's unsolved. So I was thinking in a roundabout way, since my script, which was becoming a novel, was like a police procedural type of a suspense thriller, were there elements of the Black Dahlia case that I could take in a very fictional way to incorporate into that to get to a novel length as opposed to script length? And so I had mentioned that to this actor friend of mine, and he just looked at me and put his hands on the table and said, "Did I ever tell you about my connection to the Black Dahlia case?" And I'm like, "No, this has never come up before." So what had happened is he was really good friends with another actor. And this actor's great uncle was actually the lead, one of the lead investigators on the Dahlia case. And I was like, wow. In fact, it was so funny because he's like, hey, if we Google these, the crime scene and different photos of Black Dahlia, you look at one of the gumshoes standing on the street and everything, that's his uncle. And I'm like, this is just fascinating. I'm like, I would love to see if I could talk to this gentleman. So it was a couple days later when this actor called me. And he said, "Hey, I want to hear you want to talk to my great uncle and everything. What's the reason?" I explained everything. He said, like, "Listen, I will pass your name and phone number along. If you get a call back from him, great. If not, just don't even worry about it." And I said I could live by those rules. So another couple days passed, and sure enough, I got a call from this gentleman. He was in his late 80s. Like I said, his father was one of the lead investigators on the case, and we just started a dialogue. And of course, I was the hotshot writer. I had spent like 15, 20 minutes Googling what the case was all about and whatnot. So I thought I was the expert, and I would show off my expertise, and he just started shooting me down left and right. I'd bring something up and he's like, "That's stupid. That's absurd." And after a while of doing that, because we spoke for a long time, I was finally like, what gives? What is the truth? And it was at that point he stopped and he really hemmed and he hawed. And I could tell from the very beginning he was sort of haunted about something. And that was around, I want to say the early 2000s, a number of books had come out that had painted his father in a bad light, saying that he was a bad cop and that he helped, with the cover up of the case and whatnot. And so he knew that I was in film. And I think he was looking for an ally, somebody that he could like team with, or, if I was to ever do a documentary, hopefully I do one about his dad and prove that his dad was a good cop and whatnot. So he really started hemming and hawing. And he finally came out and said, "Listen, my father told me something when I was 10, 11 years old. He made me promise never to repeat it, but I think I want to share it with you." And so I just remained silent. I wasn't going to go to him. I wasn't going to say, "Oh, come on, let me know." I just let him, take his time and, really come to his own terms with it. And he ended up telling me what his father had shared with him. And it was really mind-blowing, to be honest with you. So we talked for a while longer. As soon as we got off the phone, I went to Google, started looking everything up I could about the case, and specifically looking for what he had told me. And there wasn't anything out there about it at all. So now the question you have is, if you're given information about a cold case, about a case that's never been solved, and you know something that the general public does not, what do you do? And Kim and I knew right off the bat, we couldn't call the LAPD and said, "Hey, we have a hot tip." It's not like they have so many modern day cases to work on. I'm sure they're not concerned too much about an 80-year-old case. So that's when I reached out to Kim, because she's a producer and we've worked on some projects before and everything. And I started bouncing ideas around with her. And Kim, I'll let you take it from there of what you thought when I called saying, "Hey, I have a hot tip on an 80-year-old cold case."
Yeah, Kim, how did you get involved?
Well, the initial conversation was Jeff contacting me about developing this particular story. And as Jeff mentioned, we worked on some other projects. So we had been kicking around development of different things. And he throws this at me, and it's like, what? Seriously? Now, I'm a big true crime fan. I follow cases, stories, every true crime show. And so he's telling me Black Dahlia, and I'm like, really? Like the Black Dahlia. I had followed it for years, all the theories out there, thought it was solved, the typical assumption that Steve Hodel, his father killed the Black Dahlia. So I'm telling Jeff, like, first I thought it was solved, and second, this is too old. What are we going to possibly accomplish on a project like this? What is the cost going to be? What is the time going to be to just jump into a project like that? So after we went back and forth for a bit, Jeff convinced me with deep, deep passion that this information provided by the lead investigator's son was so powerful that how can we live with ourselves if we don't do something with it? So I hesitated because of all the reasons that I mentioned. But once you start digging, like Jeff did, and you realize a lot of these stories are almost lore, or fact-based but enhanced fiction, you start to realize there's a lot here that needs to be investigated. So Jeff was absolutely right, and I started to get really excited and said, okay, we need to do this. So we just started the roadmap. Who are we going to bring on to help us with this? How are we going to accomplish it? That's where it started.
And we were the first to admit we're not investigators. We're just really, really stupid filmmakers. So we needed a bunch of investigators that would give us credibility. But also the whole idea was to sort of, possibly shoot them as they try to move the thermometer on this case and everything. So we just wanted to assemble the absolute best team that we could that could help bring closure, hopefully to the family, but at least move the thermometer in terms of like what we might be able to find, starting off with this just one killer piece of information.
Great. Right. Jeff, why don't you talk us through just the basic facts of the case? I did like a little intro of how, just the kind of log line that you get from like Wikipedia and the FBI main page, but just kind of talk us through and, tell us the story of the case and how it kind of developed.
Yeah, by all means. So as you mentioned earlier, that January 15th, 1947, Elizabeth's body was found on a street called Norton Avenue. It had been set just a little bit back by the sidewalk. It was sort of at the end of a residential road to where there was a bunch of empty field or space, if you would, to where homes were meant to be built, but they hadn't been built yet and everything. It was sort of known for being like a lover's lane, or even like where a lot of people in the neighborhood would go and drop off trash or like lawn clippings and whatnot. But the reason why we remember this case and why people are still talking about it is the fact that her body had been drained of all its blood. It was bisected, or she was bisected at the waist. She had suffered severe trauma to her face that would include a lot of trauma inflicted by a blunt force instrument, which to this day the LAPD has not been able to put together. And of course, everyone thinks that she had like the Joker smile carved into her face, but it's really a little bit different than that. It's the corners of her mouth were cut up to her cheekbone. So, and then there's also trauma on her side. There's trauma to her leg as well. But a lot of different stuff done that just made this case and this murder just so over the top. But the big thing being the bisection.
Yeah.
And that really, we've talked to a lot of people about this, is really indicative of potentially someone who was in the medical field. And I think that's when one of the main theories in the beginning was that potentially this was a surgeon or a doctor or someone in a medical school. But even with Laura Brand, our forensic criminologist on Serial Killer Whisperer, Lawrence Bittaker did something similar where he put the body in plain view where he knew someone would stumble upon it in a strange position and a weird expression on her face. And Laura's work with him over the years is, this kind of murder for the Black Dahlia she believes is part of a serial killing. She thought that's what she believed, is that this was like one of others that they might not have known. But I'm curious to see what, as far as the early theories, what did you guys think of them?
Yeah.
Well, we were careful because again, I'm not a true crime guy. And Kim, your knowledge of the Black Dahlia is probably like Wikipedia based as well. We weren't, experts by any means. So for the entire first year, before we even shot one interview, we did nothing but research. And we read everything we possibly could on this particular case. And then it became very clear that we needed to get our hands on the case files. So once we started getting those, excuse me, once we started getting those, a more definite picture began to form about what happened and why to this day the case has gone unsolved. But right away, we knew from the very beginning that we were not focused on a doctor or a medical student. There was just too many things that we found in the numerous files that would indicate, and actually we can tell you exactly where the whole doctor thing came from by somebody remarking during the autopsy that this was a remarkable piece of surgery. But once you begin looking closer at it, at the actual bisection and how she was cut, and especially where the bisection began, and it's very hard and very rare to find photographs of Elizabeth's back. You see her body mostly from the autopsy and crime scene photos from the side or from the front. Rarely do you see anything from the back. And when you get those additional files and you look at these additional photographs, you see that, no, this was not an excellent piece of surgery at all.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the victim here. Her name was Elizabeth Short. She was 22 years old. What did you guys find out about her research? She was a Hollywood hopeful. She was an aspiring actress, in the 40s, out here in LA. That was filmmaking and television was booming at that time here. What did you find out about her that kind of helped your investigation move on?
Well, we discovered that Elizabeth had some health conditions and had been kind of transient across the country for quite some time. Her family sent her to a warmer climate, supposedly for her health conditions, to live with family. And after that move, at some point she became transient. She was in Chicago and Florida and California, just trying to make ends meet. And in that era, in the 40s, it was very hard for a woman to support herself, and housing was also short. So part of her transient history was the fact that she was forced to move from location to location, not just for cost of living, but lack of housing. That's where we believe all of the modeling and the aspiration to become an actress began, because she ended up in California and kind of fascinated with the whole culture of Hollywood. I don't believe she was just setting out to be a movie star. I believe that she kind of fell into that with those that she was traveling with and developing relationships with. Outside of that, we do have a long history of her difficulties of making ends meet. Her father abandoned her and her family at a very young age. And I say abandoned because a lot of people think her father passed away. He did fake his own death and later reconnected with the family. And that's a long story all in itself. But she really was on her own. There was 4 sisters and a single mother during a time of war. It was not easy with her father faking his death, disappearing, them having no household income to live at the time. So that's the beginning of her story, which is quite different than the press has, do I want to say, maligned her to be. They really cast a different light of who she really was as a person. So in addition to digging in the first year about suspects and facts in the case. It was really kind of learning the story about Elizabeth, who she really was as a person.
It happens a lot with the press. I mean, they'll take one little thread and run with it. If she was hanging out with anyone who was considered probably a prostitute, she probably got maligned into that group. And especially with such a gruesome murder like this, they would have easily have put her in that category so they wouldn't scare anyone else that it would happen to them, right? So it only happens to those people. I mean, that still goes on. We've dealt with so many cases like this, where it's women who are runaways or just like not, they don't have a family, and they're maligned in that respect. But what you said before was interesting, Jeff. So, you know, when you look at what happened to this poor woman, it was so precise and so meticulous. I mean, my first thought was surgeon. You're saying no, that's not what you guys explored or found. And obviously you're not going to give away everything right now, but I'm just curious, like, is there anything you can share with us that kind of led you to think otherwise? Because draining someone's blood, I mean, that takes some serious work. That's not something that
and skill,
and skill. It's not something that would just happen. Is it somebody in the military? Was it someone who had been at war? I mean, are any of those things, did any of those things come up? I'm just curious to see what other types of suspects might come out of that.
Yes, and I think that was one of the big problems with the investigation at the beginning was they were so focused on somebody with a medical background, whether it was a doctor, surgeon, medical student. So I think they lost a lot of time and ground at that particular point there, to where if you do have all the files, and we've been just meticulous about, or actually just really trying to work as hard as we possibly can to get as many different files in our possession as possible. Plus, we wanted, once we had them, we read them and reread them. We had other team members read and reread them. And we put all these different files side by side across different agencies and different divisions and started comparing notes to see, like, maybe something that was alluded to over here that we didn't really have a clear idea about is brought up in this other set of files that we were able to add more depth to it and everything. And once we did that, we began to get inside the mind of the original investigators and everything. And so even though it took a little bit more time, they were even open to other individuals as well. Was it a butcher? Was it a hunter? Was it somebody with those type of background skills as well? Could it have been somebody that had a background in mortuary science as well? So you need to look at the much, much bigger picture, but also, like I said, you need to have all these files in place to put them all side by side. Because that's one of the things we wanted to do with this project is we made the commitment. We were going to run it like a real investigation. You mentioned Lenny earlier. Lenny was adamant. I'm not joining your team unless it's run by the books like a real investigation. And so that also goes to the fact that why you see no social media on us or on this project or on any of this finding or any of our findings is because we wanted to run this like a real investigation where we weren't leaking stuff out. Because believe me, there were so many times we found something or thought we had something, and then in the process of deconstructing it, we realized, oh, this is a red herring. This is a dead end. So it's a good thing we didn't put it out there. Whenever a real investigation is done, there's always a murder book, which is the book of how they solved the case or everything, or came to the conclusion they did. The appendix of that is all the dead ends and red herrings, and which we'll get into eventually with the docuseries and everything, because I think it's important that people look at all this stuff, again, in order to put it all together to realize, why was this girl denied justice for over 80 years? So hopefully this won't happen again. But again, getting back, the original files were so important, and there was so much stuff we found in there that pointed us in that direction. The other thing was once we started examining some of these photos as well, and again, it's really quite apparent when you look at photographs of her back, when you look at close-ups of the bisection, it is not a neat piece of surgery by any means.
Yeah. So where did the police back in 1947, how long did they investigate this case? Like actively? And then when did it go cold? And then what was their biggest roadblock where they said, well, we don't have an answer?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Tough question to answer real quickly as well. So it was and keep in mind, there's no statute of limitation of murder, so technically it's an open, ongoing case and whatnot. But it seemed like interest waned into the 50s, and then one chief of police asked another investigator to step up and look into it in the 60s. We know that OCID, which is Organized Crime Intelligence Division, reopened the case in 1978. We actually have an OCID informant working with us that was actually one of the detectives tasked with reopening the case and looking into it for about a week before it was shut down. But there's always this sort of history to where the LAPD has sort of dangled these, different tidbits out there, these different red herrings, but never has seemed definitively interested in solving this case. And in order to answer the why to that, again, the investigation of all the files, putting all the files side by side, getting in the minds of the original investigators, and also seeing who the true players really are in this whole thing, it allowed us to begin to answer that.
Starting with Lenny, he was a big part of building our team. Starting at ground zero without a team, not coming from a documentary background, never investigating a cold case before. Lenny's like, again, these are the parameters that you guys must work in for me to be involved in the project. And then what kind of caliber of a team do we want? And looking at all the former theories, I'll call them theories, on the Dahlia case, we didn't want to repeat having a preconceived suspect. We didn't want to use professionals that could be doubted. So Lenny was instrumental in locating Barry and brought on Teresa Payton, who is the first female CIO in the White House for the Bush administration. She is a misinformation and disinformation expert. She's a cybersecurity and AI expert as well.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Monday.com AI agents took over my work, and I absolutely love it. Chasing deadlines, writing status reports, updating stakeholders. Agents handle the daily grind now. I stay in the loop only when it matters. Create your own AI agent in minutes on Monday.com.
And she was brought on board by Lenny to really kind of look at this information, look at what documents might be legitimate documents, which documents, as you were referring to, Rob, have more information that we need to consider, potentially what might be missing from some of these reports. And that was invaluable for this case. And then we moved on to bringing Barry on the team because we wanted a connection within Los Angeles. She was killed in Los Angeles. And without that connection and without going into those case files or finding case files, we would be dead in the water. And Barry felt that we needed to bring on someone who was active because he was retired after 30 plus years in law enforcement, even though he's a homicide detective and worked for RHD, as Jeff mentioned, that held the Dahlia file. Most have never been allowed to look in it. And again, it's been kept under lock and key. You cannot find the LAPD file anywhere. You cannot find complete LADA files anywhere. There are thousands and thousands of missing pages in every report. The FBI file that's available to the public is incomplete and redacted. There is a lot missing. Nobody has seen the Gangster Squad files. So how are we going to find all this information? We needed to contact the LAPD and try to start a partnership to access these. And so Barry wanted to bring in someone active. So he brought on Karen Shanka. And Karen Shanka is a homicide detective with the LA County Sheriff's Office. She works cold cases currently. She is retired from her former law enforcement positions, but Karen was instrumental in locating archives in the sheriff's department. There was always kind of a tug of war of jurisdiction over this case between LAPD and the sheriff's office. And they all had separate records. And you have to think about the time of 1947. There was a lot of law enforcement agencies that were new. They didn't work together like they do today. It was all, this is my information, this is your information, I'm going to solve this case. And there's
it's kind of still like that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well,
Still like that.
Let's say it's improved. So finding this information, Karen brought in some archives from the sheriff's office. And I'll let Jeff talk about what was in the sheriff files. But Karen said, you know, we need to go a little bit further. It took her quite some time to do that, well over a year before we found those archives. And she said, you know, we need to get the LADA files. And at the time, the DA's office and all the Los Angeles offices were still under lockdown, you know, with COVID, and appointment only if you were allowed in at all. So she said, let's bring on Steve Cooley, the former Los Angeles district attorney, and talk to him about how can we access the DA records? Do they exist? What's in there? Who do we have to talk to, et cetera? So she introduced us to Steve Cooley, and he was absolutely fascinated with the information that we had already discovered on the case. And he agreed to join the team as a consultant, a pro bono consultant, because he was so passionate about what we were doing and felt we were on the right track. And he advocated for probably, I don't know, Jeff, you think like 7, 8, 9 months to obtain the LADA files. He contacted pretty much every division to try to help track down these files. And eventually we were able to locate roughly, Jeff, was it 1,000, 2,000 pages?
And 968 pages.
And there's a total of 4,000.
Correct. From 1949. And then you have another 4,000 from 1950.
So we did receive transcripts from the 1949 and 1950 grand jury files from Steve, both incomplete. As Jeff mentioned, 1949 had 3,000 missing pages alone. They had no copy of the autopsy report. He has continued to try to advocate to locate any other records, but they have not been able to be obtained. So we continued on the investigation. Steve then decides to bring on 2 LAPD veterans, Commander Robert Taylor and Captain Greg Meyer, who also came on as pro bono advisors, both with homicide experience, long tenure with the LAPD, their entire career, very similar to Steve. And their role was to try to break the ice with the LAPD. Why, after 80 years, are we not releasing this file? Will you meet with this team? Will you hear what they've accomplished thus far and consider either a partnership or information sharing? So we did begin that relationship, and that's been a long road as well, with their help. And then we brought on Leslie Thompson and Jim Neiman, who are forensic criminalists. They are active with the LA County Sheriff's Forensics Lab, both extensive tenures in forensics locally in the LA area. We brought them on because we were convinced that we had found the location of the crime. Thanks to Steve Cooley getting us those grand jury transcripts. There was enough information along with witnesses that we had interviewed, and this is a great part of the story for Lenny to share at a future date. But we were convinced we knew where the crime scene was. So then it was appropriate. Now we're years into this at this point. Then it was appropriate to bring on the criminalists. And just like Steve Cooley and Greg Meyer and Robert Taylor and Lenny, everyone who's come along has come along due to passion for this case and hopefully passion for future cases. But it took seconds to convince some of the most experienced professionals in the Los Angeles area to assist in this. And Jim and Leslie were no different. They signed on to help us, and they did extract evidence at the crime scene. So that's the bulk of our team, outside of Mike Rothmiller, who was our OCID informant, and Frankie Citro, who is our mob informant or consultant. Yeah, so the team is absolutely phenomenal. We didn't.
That's great. I mean, I know Mike Rothmiller pretty well. I've known him for 5-6 years. I mean, he's actually, we've talked about a bunch of cases that he's worked on, because not just, he was in that unit at that time. So he has some really intimate knowledge, and, even going back to the Marilyn Monroe death. I mean, he was talking to me about that. Mm-hmm. So he has some really interesting inside perspective. He's kind of helped us with some Mickey Cohen information for the Alcatraz too. So, I mean, it sounds like you did everything right to get the right players involved, because that's super important. And I don't think people really understand that, because some people try to solve it on themselves, and there's no possible way you can do this. You need experts. You need kind of like an X-Men team to kind of help you through this process, because everybody has a specialty. Everybody has a particular viewpoint on what they think and how they can bring it to fruition and collaborate together. So, I mean, the fact that you had the time to do that, a lot of people don't have a lot of time to do that. The fact that you took the time to do that just gives credence to the credibility that you're trying to kind of establish here.
So, Jeff, what can you share from the sheriff's files that you found?
Well, keep in mind that we were able to get quite a few files from them. And the reason it took so long to get it is because they were all hard copies and they had to be scanned in one by one. But we were able to come up with just under 4,000 additional files that we had not found. And honestly, it was just totally mind-blowing, because there was sworn witness testimony in there from different characters that we had never considered before. And that put us on a different path, because again, we're deconstructing, we're evolving, we don't have tunnel vision, it's all evidence-based and victim-focused. So once we found these new witnesses that the grand jury spoke to in 49 and 50, it started giving us different ideas, especially in regards to the motive for the murder. Because at this time, we believe we know who did it. We believe we know where the crime scene is. We believe we know what the murder weapon was. Again, the LAPD's never figured that out. We believe we know it and can corroborate it. The big thing, though, for us is the motive for the case. Because now that we know the Short family, I just feel a huge need to be able to close this case on all fronts, to be able to answer all the answers. So Elizabeth can have peace, so the family can have peace. So we have a pretty good idea of what we believe the motive for the crime is. We don't really want to go into detail about it right now, because it needs to be corroborated. Sure. And the way that it needs to be corroborated is with information in the autopsy report for Elizabeth Short. We believe the secret to the motive is in there. And that's one of the reasons why we've put together a petition asking for the LAPD to release this autopsy report, because we've been talking to them in earnest for about 5 years. We were talking to LAPD Chief of Police Jim McDonnell for over a year now. We've been invited in. We've talked to the custodian of the files beforehand. We shared some evidence with her, just to show that, hey, we aren't a couple cranks. Hey, we actually have a real team here. Hey, we actually have all these files. This is what we've been able to discover. And I remember in my very first meeting with Steve Cooley, we just met over dinner just to say, hey, thank you for helping us to find these files. And I said, Mr. Cooley, I'd love to show you, because of the files you got us, we are able to find this, this, and this. And I remember that moment in the restaurant perfectly, because Steve just reached across the table, pointed at one of my documents and says, I've never seen anything like this in this case before. And that's when he really wanted to be able to help us out and everything. So for us, we want to be able to be the definitive word, close off everything, and that includes the motive. And like I said, the motive we need to corroborate with the autopsy report for Elizabeth, which unfortunately the LAPD won't release, but we're hoping to take this to the court of public opinion. And with not enough outcry and righteous indignation, we're hoping to move the thermometer to get the LAPD to release, not only to us, we're not asking that the autopsy report be released just to us, but for the public.
To the public.
Right.
Because that's one of the things we talked about with Steve Cooley, is he goes, as DA, we release stuff to the public because we want their help. We want to get this stuff solved. It doesn't do us any good not to solve these cases because, well, as Steve was always saying, this is what civilized societies do. We solve our cold cases so that we can learn how they're solved and how this won't happen again. So that's why we really need to push the LAPD as hard as we possibly can. Because like I said, we've been knocking on their door for 5 years, shared with them a lot of evidence, proved what we have in order to be able to say, hey, this is why we just want to look at this one document. Because the entire Elizabeth Short file is locked up in a filing cabinet from the 40s. It's several thousand pages. And out of all this information, we just want one autopsy report to corroborate our findings to close off the murder in this case.
What's their answer? What's their answer? Like when you met with these police chiefs and stuff like that, what are they telling you why they won't at least cooperate?
Well, it's interesting because the answer changes all the time. We can't possibly cooperate with a for-profit team investigating a case or documentary team. Yet they cooperate on.
I've never heard that in my entire career.
Start to list the projects that they do cooperate on, and it's endless. So when called on that, it's okay, we're busy. We have these other cases going on.
But Kim, if you don't mind, before you get into that, let me just say real quickly, for profit and everything is that, yes, we have a production company which produces the docuseries, but we also have a nonprofit foundation. So the idea
it doesn't matter. This is FOIA. This is Freedom of Information Act. We should, as the public, should have access to these files. It doesn't matter. They work with tons of media outlets, and all of them make money. That has nothing to do. You guys aren't doing this obviously to make money, because I know for a fact, after working for years for free on these cases, there's very little money to be made. That's not really what drives these things. So for them to even suggest that is ludicrous, especially here in Los Angeles.
Exactly.
So you don't even have to defend your position, Jeff, because it's not necessary.
Yeah.
You guys are working for, let's be clear, you're working for free on a project that you're passionate about because you want to get answers, and the public has the right to get those answers. It's a public case.
And not to mention the Short family understands the difference. In 80 years, they've never cooperated with investigators, with press, authors, filmmakers. It's absolutely endless. They've had hundreds and hundreds of requests. Never once have they spoke to or cooperated with anyone. They do understand that this is a for-profit production and what is going to come, what fruit is going to come from that. And they are fully supportive. Same thing with the killer's family, fully supportive, has followed the evidence with us the entire 5 years, has been instrumental in breaking through these case files and connecting dots, especially with thousands of missing pages. So I just wanted to make sure that the audience understands that the Short family is supportive as well. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, that's key. You know, when you're working on these projects, the first thing we do is ask the family. Like, we've worked on really high profile cases. I mean, obviously we're working with the family on Alcatraz, but also Noah Presgrove was a huge case that's been going on for 3 years. And we weren't going to work on that case unless the family asked us to help.
Well, they actually reached out to us.
And they reached out to us. So, you know, we just don't like to do that without the family's permission, because it's their family member, and maybe they have their reasons for not wanting to do it. Obviously, they trust you guys, and you have them on, supporting you, which is, I think, key into why you're going to solve this. Because to me, in our experience, when you have all these things coming together, there's a reason for it. And the family needs that. They just need to know. Everybody needs to know what happened to their loved one who was murdered. It's just human. You have to tell them. So the fact that the police are hiding this autopsy report for whatever reason at this point, 80 years later, just release.
That's the thing is
file.
ridiculous, because we're dealing with this on Alcatraz too, and not as old, but we're talking 60 plus years. And the fact that even our FBI agents that we've had on the case, this is they don't agree with all the redactions on these reports. They don't, at this point, it should be everyone that could possibly have some sort of negative ramifications due to, LAPD or a judge or a lawyer. They're all gone. They're all gone.
I mean, the best one we get is that if we release this or unredacted, it's a matter of national security.
Yeah, we get that a lot.
We get that a lot.
Right.
Well,
But,
I can assure you the killer couldn't possibly still be alive. It's not a matter of national security. It's not a matter of stopping a killer at this point. I could go on and on, but there's no justification at this point, just about 80 years later, not to release this information. And mind you, the LAPD does not even have the complete files that we have to date, nor do they have the resources or the manpower, and have admitted over and over this case is not being worked. And when they can't put all the pieces together, no one has been able to put the pieces together, again, because of lack of resources, whether it's time or otherwise. Why not cooperate? Why not solve a case with a family pleading to please finally solve this case? So that ever-changing, go ahead, Cindy.
No. I'm just curious, just for the audience, because some people are familiar with this case. There's a handful that might not be. In the beginning, did they have any suspects that they were honing in on, getting tunnel vision on? Was there anyone that we could kind of focus on to say, rule them out, that person, no?
Well, they narrowed down from hundreds of suspects to a little over 100, 120 range, if I remember correctly. And then that was, over that first 2 years, continued to be whittled down. There are some known suspects in the top 10 that most of the public are aware of to different degrees. Our killer is in that list.
Okay. That was my question.
Interesting.
And the LAPD, back to the question of why won't they release it? I don't want to put words in their mouth. All I can tell you is, okay, we're going to set up a meeting. We'll follow up with you on the decision. Well, the chief says you can see the file. Well, I agree you could see the file. Okay, well, let's set up the meeting. Okay, well, we'll follow up with you. Months go by, calling again. When are we going to have our meeting? Now, mind you, we had 3 meetings before this trying to develop the relationship with the LAPD. Then certain RHD personnel retire. They begin a theory of their own, which I find very coincidental as to why we spent.
What is RHD again?
years.
For people who don't understand what it is, RHD?
Robbery Homicide Division. It's the
Okay.
elite division who handles
In LA.
local cases in Los Angeles and most local.
So as soon as so when you started looking into it and making these requests for meetings, they started kind of, oh, well, we're going to look into this now. There might be that they started
first
jumpstarting an
it's
investigation.
A year of not returning our calls and begging and pleading for a meeting, to then Steve Cooley making the request, to then, Steve Cooley and Robert Taylor and Greg Meyer and the former custodian of the Black Dahlia case making the request unified to RHD, and then being blocked in another year and a half of silence till McDonald became police chief. Then we started making some progress and having a productive back and forth. And then we started getting the ever-changing answers or excuses as to why they can't release this information.
Steve Cooley, real quick. How long was he the DA's office there? Because I think it's the
3
same
terms.
Yeah,
He served 3 terms and over 39 years in the DA's office in entirety.
Yeah, he's the same guy. Are you still you still working with him right now?
Yes.
Okay, because he's involved in another case. He did the Lawrence Bittaker Toolbox Killers case that are.
I believe so.
He did. I'm pretty sure.
I'm almost positive, but we have to double check.
It's interesting.
But it is interesting. Well, he's been in LA for almost 40 years. I mean, it would make
Yes.
sense. But again, there were some strange similarities when we talked about, we started diving into Lawrence Bittaker and the Toolbox Killers who were running around LA during the 70s, killing everybody. To the Black Dahlia, she's mentioned that a few times in her work, that there was some similarities to the way that the body was found and positioned and dissected that struck her. It's kind of interesting that they won't release the autopsy report. I think that's fascinating. And really, like you're saying, deserves a public outcry. So we're going to end this episode with everyone tell us what you think about the LAPD not releasing the autopsy report for the Black Dahlia. Do you think that they should do that? We do.
Yeah, 80 years. What do you got to hide here at this point? You know, let the families have some answers. You know, let the world know what happened to this poor woman, Elizabeth Short, 22.
And dispose, that was the thing with a lot of these girls. They're disposable, right? They're runaways, they're transient. They figure no one's going to come looking for this girl. No one's going to care. Little did they know, 80 years later, people are still talking about her murder. She was a human being. So we need to remember that.
Well,
and I think it's wonderful what you guys are doing.
Absolutely.
What a fantastic team. What a fantastic story behind the scenes, but also the dedication that you've had for 5 years to deconstruct this really intense and multi-layered case that is just shocking to everyone when you look at some of the pieces of it.
Yeah.
So,
and we look forward to talking to you more about this on future podcasts and kind of diving deeper in to kind of find out how you deconstructed all of this. So thank you for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Quickly request, please go to change.org, search Elizabeth Short petition and sign the petition, please.
And we'll put a
please
link
help.
for it in the story notes here for the podcast.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
You might need MIDI if you ever hairsprayed your bangs into a waterfall, layered slouch socks, tied a scrunchie to the bottom corner of your t-shirt, or tried to go for a run with a CD player. If this took you down memory lane, you might need MIDI. Perimenopause can start 10 years before you actually go through menopause. So for some women, that can be as early as 35. Nobody ever told you that? Well, nobody told us either. That's why we built MIDI. If you're experiencing symptoms like night sweats, weight gain, or just generally don't feel like yourself anymore, you may be in perimenopause. But here's some good news. With the right care, these symptoms are treatable. Book a virtual visit with a menopause specialist at MIDI. Visit joinmidi.com to schedule with an expert who gets it. Specialist-led care, virtual visits, insurance eligible. Midlife needs MIDI. Results may vary. Medications prescribed only if clinically appropriate based on a consultation with a clinician. Insurance coverage varies. Check with your plan for coverage.